Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it's Thursday. It is March 11th. This will be our chart lesson for the day, and what we really had was two legs up today, and then the market traded back down. We started out, prices trended up and then went into this range, and when prices trend up into a range, the bias is normally going to be to the upside when they break out. If they succeeded a breakout, it's probably going to be to the upside. That's not 100%, but generally that's what prices will do. So the bias will normally be in one of these ranges as to what prices traded into the range with, and we traded up into this range. So uh, if prices continue higher, there's a good chance we're going to get a measured move. And if you measure this first leg over here, this is your equal distance. And generally you start it from the lowest point. If it continues higher, move it up to the highest point. And if you do that, that gets you pretty close to the high. But I generally look for where the lowest point was, and that's going to be my target. And you can see we kind of got the close outside this two-tiered channel just prior to that, traded up into that, kind of went sideways, made one more push higher. And probably the reason is this is a very strong move up. It doesn't look like it. When you see a trade like this or a trend like this that goes straight up, very few bearish bars in there. And when you do have a little correction, it's not much more than a bar or two and a few ticks back, and you see lots of stems on both sides. That is a strong trend. And if you notice this, let me back out a little bit. It's probably a spiking channel up, but I played it as off this trend line right here and off those first few bars, and it spiked up and it stayed in this upper half the whole time. So once you start to see it multiple times bouncing there, and if you recognize how strong this trend is, and it's a strong trend, like I said, when you see very shallow corrections of only a few ticks and a bar or two, and it bounces right off a key entry point and it just keeps going higher and higher, and there's lots of stems, it doesn't look like it, but that is a very strong trend. And when you see that, you can pretty much buy any pullback to that trend line that bounces off of it with a good signal bar. I'm not as excited about the ones that you had to trade into a new high like these two, but they're still valid. I marked them all green, um, and you can see any one of them would have worked. The better ones are when it pulls back a little bit and you got a little room to the highs. Um, but there's several in there, and so I just marked them green because they're a little advanced. You need to be able to recognize that type trend. You need to see this spike in channel or possibly two-tiered channel. I didn't change it really because when we got the break close outside, we got it at the same for either the trend line or the trend line, whichever one it is. You still got your break at the same place and your two legs up, and then we had a little two-legged correction before we tried to push up one more time, and then prices sold off. So, and this lasted from about a little after 9 o'clock to, I'd say the uptrend probably ended right in here. So it was about a 2-hour trend. And I mean, that is a strong trend. So anyway, that's why I mark those. And that's the reason they're green, is just because it's a little more advanced. When prices don't come back for the EMA for long periods of time, it gets more risky. But when you see a trend like that, and that trend line or midline or whatever is holding all the way up, and you don't see any hardly corrections, you can't hardly ignore that. And otherwise, if you don't trade that, you don't get any trades on the way up because there's no second entries, there's no failures. It's just too strong a trend. It's too much momentum to even get a correction of more than a couple of bars back. Even the ones that have more than a couple of bars are just sideways. That is a strong trend. So learn to recognize that. But let me back out one more time, and you can see the two legs up, leg one, and there's a little two-legged correction there, and then you'd look for leg two. Even though that it hesitated for a long time, it continued on until it met that target. And then we went sideways a little bit and made one more push up before prices turned down. Then we spent the rest of the day in this yellow channel. So let me back out, or zoom in, I guess I should say, and we'll talk about the trades. Okay, here we are. Let's talk about these trades. Well, I didn't mean for it to do that. I didn't really want to go out quite that far. 7 o'clock came right in here, and we'd already trended up, and we were trying to make a new high here and just kind of going sideways. You can see how flat the EMA got. And we already had this one leg down, so then when we start this next one, you look for a measured move. And I really looked at this like a double top right here, or actually right here. I treated it like a double top, and then we had one leg, first entry, and then we made a second leg, second entry long, and it failed. And so when it turned down and broke lower right there, I liked going short. You didn't have this support here really. You got a bounce there, but there's no really consistent support there at this point, even though the line's drawn there now. I mean, if you come back over to the chart right here, that's what you're looking at the time. And it looks like we're just about to roll over really. So, and I treated this like a trap. You could have actually done the same thing here. Notice you just treated that as a double top first entry. And then actually it didn't break higher there. So no, this is the first time it breaks higher. So I treated that as a double top, then first entry, second entry. This didn't end up going higher here before it turned down. So even though there's a second entry short there, I wouldn't take that one. It's too congestive. It still looks a little bullish. Everything's above the EMA, but when we pull back, if it would have broke higher there, that would have been the place to enter, but it doesn't break higher till right here, and then it turns down instantly. So you may let it go break on below and drop a limit order a few ticks back just to give yourself some room from this, but at this point I'm not too concerned with that low. Once it bounces here a few more times, then you got to take it into account, hey, this might be a range. So I don't think you want to go long here because you got this channel working down, but you finally get a close outside. We try to go lower, breaks lower and turns up, and we're back, and you can see that same support comes into play again, but I just think it's too early to go long, and you don't want to go long halfway in at this point. And we just start working sideways. I don't see anything in there I like, period. There's a second entry short right there, and it would have worked, but that's just sideways. And so I just don't think you want to trade any of that. Runs on up, and then we're finding resistance up here, but you just don't get a setup. That's a lower high, but it's not bearish enough. It's too bullish. Finally we come back. Notice you made that high. You test it once, you test it twice, and that's a bearish bar. I like going short there. And you get a lower high here. This one's real close. You could argue for it to be red, actually. It breaks higher and fails and turns back down. So your entry's not a whole lot. It's maybe a 2 or 3 ticks better than that one, but you still got a long way back to the lows here. And actually, we had some temporary lows right across here. But even if you account for those, you still got room to get out. So I think you can take that trade either way, no matter how you're looking at it. But it runs on down to the bottom, bounces again. You don't get a long entry. That's just not bullish enough. This one's getting close, but again, there's a lot of stem there. And if it closes 1 tick or 2 ticks lower, it's almost right in the middle of the bar. So I don't think that one quite. It may have made the upper 1/3. You know, you could argue for that one. I don't like it personally, right in the middle there, but you may take it. You get a failure here, but you don't want to go long right into the resistance of the real tight range there. It ends up not mattering. It breaks out and goes higher, but you don't know that. And it could turn down just like it did all the other times across there. That's what you would expect to happen. So you don't want to risk that one. But we have this channel working up. We don't quite get a measured move. based on the width of the range. You can see that right there. We missed that by a few ticks. And that's what the blue line is. But you turn down, you get a close outside, it tries to go higher once, twice, and it tries to go higher a third time and fails. It gives you this big bearish bar. I like going short one tick below that because you have to figure that the breakout of this range is probably going to fail, especially when we can't even get a measured move on it. So with that triple test or double test there, I like that one. That turns out to be a fairly decent move. And it comes back to the middle, bounces again. And again, there's a higher low, but it's just congestion. It doesn't quite get back to the EMA. There's a failure here, but you got to go along right into the highs. You can't do that. But notice what happens. Eventually it pushes through and it pulls back, and it gives you this bullish breakout pullback long. And it actually tried to go lower once, twice, and then a third time, and it breaks a tick or so lower in this little 2-bar matching low and turns up and closes on its very high. That's a little risky, but we're probably going higher. This is a nice trend working up here. And it's also off of this key entry point on this spiking channel or midline, depending on how you look at it. So you got the resistance that's now acting as support, the measured move. You got the breakout here, pull back and test it. You've got the trend line or midline, however you want to look at it, and you got a hugely bullish bar. And this is looking like a really strong move up so far. So you'll probably get a scalp out there. It's still a little aggressive though. But because of this trend line on the spiking channel, I like it at this point. It does confirm this line too. But by the time you get up here, it bounces off of it again and gives you a very shallow correction. I mean, you got enough going right there to see, hey, we're probably going to get a measured move. And this is a really strong, tight trend right here. You're probably not going to get any second entries or any failed second entry shorts or anything like any kind of traps or anything like that. So every time it comes back, like I said, you could actually enter on this. I marked them all green because you need to know what you're doing to do this. You need to recognize that trend. You need to understand what prices are doing. They're trying to make this measured leg up. And so I like every time it came back to that line and gave you a bullish bar, I like entering. Till you get your break and you get a couple of legs up, and then it looks like we're going to reverse. It looked like you were going to get a chance to enter here on a lower high, and it didn't break lower, and then it breaks higher again, and there's a failure right there, but that's just two sideways. And again, it's looking like a range at this point. Regardless, you got a range right. You've got this. Let me just draw it. There's just a range right here, and you just don't want to enter in that because you enter short here and it turns around and comes back. It would have ended up working, but you don't know that. But now you got two legs down. I didn't show these measured moves, but there's two legs down here. And it's pretty much to the tick on those two measured legs down, and then it reverses. And this is actually a new swing high. It's higher than that one. And so that's a first entry and then it drops down. That's a second entry long. Good bit away from the EMA, two measured legs down. It's still a little aggressive because you're taking the very low point of the move. But there's a lot of reasons if you're a good chart reader, to say, hey, this is worth taking, because this turns out to be an important low. Notice how prices rocket right back up and go up, and they move up. Let's just call that 39.49 to, it's basically a 9 or 10 point move in just a couple of minutes, just a few minutes. And so these are worth considering whenever they happen. And same thing on the other side, you just don't get a setup up here. We're working back down. I don't see a short I like. There is a failure here. You might take that one. Notice that there's a first entry, second entry, but it looks a little congestive. There's not really a bar with no body here or very small body, that's still got a lot of body to it. So you may not consider that congestion, even though it's still something I'd be worried about. So that's a possibility to go short. I just didn't like it because of all the up down bars, and it was too big a chance it breaks lower and turns back up again. But it's a failure, and it does you are going short below the EMA, so and it's probably going to trap some people to the upside. And all these people that jumped in here will probably have to exit, and you see how it runs down real quick back to the lows. And you actually get a triple test right here, and I think that would have still worked, but there's no rejection off these lows, and you still got this spike and channel down in play, and there's a good chance we go lower, and sure enough you get a close outside and it goes lower before it bounces. But once again, there's that new low on a breakout with a nice little reversal type bar. It could be an important low, so I like riding that one back again, just like this one. It's kind of a repeat, and it's good for another quick move up. It comes back, gives you a higher low here that's right off the same support, so I like it too. But then it just starts working sideways, and you'll just get chopped up if you keep entering in that. So if you didn't enter long here, then just skip the rest of this. And then we get, it looks like we may have a channel here. Somehow I've moved this channel. Should be like that right there. But you wouldn't have had that prior to this. You would have just been still playing the sideways stuff. But it turns out there's a yellow down channel here, and it gets we get just as bearish a trend down. And notice you do have some little stronger correction, at least one in there, but there's not very many big corrections in this either. And look at the stems. This is the same thing back to the downside, a really strong trend. Notice how the midline is holding the whole way down. That's a strong downtrend, just like that uptrend. Learn to recognize these because they're really good to trade. I mean, this was all after 2 o'clock, so doesn't really matter. But that's what I saw today. Again, there's 2 legs up. We had a little bit of hesitation in the middle. You got a spike and channel up, and then you had a 2-legged correction, and then we worked up from there. And it just took prices a little while to get moving here, but you can see the price action still worked out. And again, study this trend right here because this is a very strong trend. Sometimes I've seen those go, you get one of those on a day and they go and go and go, and it may not stay this strong straight up for a while. It might fold over a few times and make some flatter, but it just keeps going and going. And those are nice trends to try to trade. So because the corrections are very few, and when they are, they're very shallow. If you look at that almost, if you back out enough, that almost just looks like one move up because there's no serious corrections in it. And that's a nice trend to catch. If you catch one of those, you might get a runner and you can ride it all the way to the top. So anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. Hope you had a good week. No chart lessons on Friday, so no chart lesson tomorrow. We'll be back again Monday, but I am done for the day. This is actually one more thing before I forget. I'm probably, next week is spring break, and my daughter's going to be out of school at home for a couple of days, so I may take a couple of days off next week with it being spring break. I'm not sure yet. It just depends on what she does. But if she does come home, I may take a couple of days off to spend some time with her, take her to a baseball game here. The baseball team's playing here this weekend and next week some too. So may do something like that. But anyway, I'll let you know ahead of time. But if I do, there may not be any chart lessons on those days. If I do take a couple of days off, I'll just have to keep you posted on that. I'm just not sure at this point. But I'm going to wrap it up for today and for the week. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.